When Kuru was just 11 years old, his own grandmother locked him in a basement and force-fed him the flesh of two different yokais, Mermaid and a Kudan. For years, she isekai'd him over and over again just to see how many times he could come back to life. Turns out, the experiment made Kuro's body immortal that regenerates any wound and a power that lets him choose any future he wants from infinite possibilities, making him the most powerful being alive. However, before any of this, Kotoko sits on a hospital bench and dreams about the time when a mysterious entity asked her to become the god of wisdom while she was still a child. She soon wakes up and notices a young man named Kuru sitting nearby, so she decides to speak with him. However, Kuro does not seem to recognize her, telling Kotoko to remind him about the person who once saved his life. Kuro insists that he has not experienced anything life-threatening in the past decade, but Kotoko explains that 2 years earlier, she met him at this very hospital when he suddenly fell. She managed to catch him before he could hit his head on the ground. At the time, she told him to remember her for the rest of his life because she had saved him, and when he agreed, it made her blush. To Kotoko, Kuru resembles a goat who is thin but strong, with the potential for powerful horns, depending on the breed. Back in the present, she wonders if that moment was what people call love at first sight. However, Kuru points out that the girl he met back then was not wearing a beret. Kotoko questions whether he identifies girls by their hats, but Kuro dismisses the idea, explaining that remembering other girls too well would only make his girlfriend Saki angry. Kotoko then removes her hat and sits right next to Kuro, asking him to remember her properly. She introduces herself again and casually brings up that she heard he and Saki have broken up. Hearing this, Kuru is shocked and immediately wonders how she could possibly know that. In a flashback, Kotoko feels frustrated whenever she sees Kuru spending time with Saki and begins looking into his background. She learns that Kuru frequently visits the hospital to see someone he claims is his cousin, who has been a long-term patient there. However, a nurse later tells Kotoko that the person is not actually his cousin but his girlfriend, Saki, who is a year older than him. After that, Kotoko keeps hearing various stories about Kuru from the nurses, including details about him and Saki meeting each other's parents and being so close that they might get married someday. Then one day, Kotoko notices Kuro sitting alone and asks a nurse whether he and his girlfriend have broken up. The nurse is surprised as well and explains that Kuru has not spoken to his girlfriend since February, making it very likely that they are no longer together. Back in the present, Kuru becomes annoyed that the hospital staff shared so much of his personal life with her and complains that there seems to be no privacy at all. Kotoko quickly points out that they never told her who the patient really was or why they were hospitalized, and Kuro responds that it is probably better for her not to know those details. Since he is single now, Kotoko asks him if he thinks about starting fresh by meeting someone new, and Kuro thinks that she means something else. Kotoko then straight away asks him if he would consider dating her with marriage in mind because it's been 2 years since she has been in love with him. However, Kuru thinks that she might be in middle school and that would make him look like Diddy. Hearing that, Kotoko gets furious and says that she plans on applying to his university next year, and this makes Kuru laugh because he has been asked out like that for the first time. Kuru then tells her that it wasn't Saki's fault that they broke up, so he can't go out with anyone as of now. Kuru explains that they went on a trip to Kyoto last year, and one night when they were walking along the Kamo River, they saw a kappa, which is supposed to be a monster. After that, Kuro runs away like a scared rabbit without even checking on Saki, and because of that, they break up. As Kuro prepares to leave, Kotoko stops him and says he is lying, insisting that he was not the one who ran away, but the kappa was instead. She adds that this proves Kuru is actually dangerous. Kotoko then explains that yokai, ghosts, and kappa are always around her and even talk to her, and all of them describe Kuro as something frightening. When Kuro asks how she knows all of this, Kotoko reveals that she was once kidnapped by those creatures and held for 2 weeks. She also says she has now become the god of wisdom and shows him her prosthetic right eye and left leg. Later, as Kuru boards a bus, a worried ghost approaches Kotoko, asks if she is alright, and warns her that a creature has appeared at the library. The next day, Kotoko meets Kuru again and asks if he has looked into her claims, only for him to realize that everything she said is true. At that moment, a ghost rushes in and reports that the library's barrier has been broken, and Kotoko quickly asks Kuru to help in battle so she can clear all his remaining doubts. At first, Kuro refuses, but Kotoko convinces him by saying that if he does not help, she might be killed by the creature. Having little choice, Kuru carries her back to the library, where he encounters the ghost of a fallen warrior and is visibly unsettled by it. Moments later, a giant red monster suddenly appears. When it lunges toward Kotoko, Kuro quickly saves her and retreats. Despite only having one leg, Kotoko repeatedly throws herself into the fight and does everything she can to stop the creature, but every attempt ends in failure. The monster then charges directly at Kuro and tears off one of his arms, leaving Kotoko completely shocked. As she watches him, she notices that he still has the same calm and unfazed expression he had 2 years earlier. To her amazement, Kuro simply regenerates the missing arm, and because his flesh is highly poisonous, the monster soon collapses to the ground. Wanting answers, Kuro asks Kotoko who she really thinks he is. Kotoko wonders if the ghosts have been keeping information from her and explains that people tend to avoid talking about things that frighten them. Kuro then reveals the truth, explaining that when he was 11 years old, he ate the flesh of 2 different yokai. The next day, Kuro brings flowers for his cousin at the hospital, and Kotoko also joins him like an attractive leech. Kuro asks her if her usual deduction skills told her that he was here, or was it her yokai friends. Kotoko reveals that she has an appointment for her leg and eye, so she had to be here. While walking outside, Kotoko tells him that ever since that ordeal the other day, the Ayakashi won't stop talking about him. She thinks that it's his powers that scare all the ghosts out there, and asks if his left arm is really okay. Kuro gets surprised to see that she is actually worried about him, and she mentions that it's all because she is the one who involved him in all this. Kuro reveals that ever since he ate mermaid flesh at the age of 11, his body always repairs on its own no matter how badly it gets hurt. Kotoko has heard before that those who consume mermaid flesh will become immortal and gain eternal youth. So she is curious, why doesn't he look exactly 11? And Kuro says that it's because he ate other flesh along with the mermaids, which is nullifying some of the effects. When Kotoko asks him the name of the other yokai's flesh, Kuro ignores her and starts walking. Before he could leave, Kotoko invites him to see a giant serpent tonight with her, who is the guardian spirit of the mountains. Kuro questions why Kotoko keeps putting herself in dangerous situations when she does not possess any obvious supernatural powers. In response, Kotoko explains that she does have a special ability that allows her to communicate with Ayakashi and even physically interact with ghosts. Even so, Kuro refuses to accompany her, claiming that he would rather stay home and enjoy some soup he made the previous night. Later that evening, Kotoko heads into the mountains to meet with the serpent. While speaking with him, she mentions that she has a boyfriend named Kuro and that she invited him to come along, but he turned her down. Earlier that day, Kotoko had visited Kuro's house in another attempt to persuade him to join her in the mountains, but he firmly refused. However, he did give her some soup and a hoodie so she could stay warm and take care of herself. Afterward, Kotoko discusses the matter that has been troubling the serpent, the murdered body discovered in his swamp. About a month earlier, 2 hikers searching the mountains for wild vegetables came across the corpse of a man at Sukuna Swamp. The victim had been stabbed in the chest with a sharp knife, leading the authorities to classify the case as a murder. Although the man carried no identification or personal belongings, investigators were still able to identify him surprisingly quickly. Eventually, a 30-year-old woman named Tanya was arrested as a suspect, and they are trying to gather evidence right now. Kotoko concludes that the woman threw the body into the swamp to hide it. The serpent comments that dumping a corpse into the water was a terrible thing to do, since it is the water he drinks, though he adds that the Ayakashi living in the mountains regularly clean it. The serpent also reveals that the woman wanted the body to be discovered quickly. From this, Kotoko realizes that the woman never intended for the police to find her. Instead, she wanted the serpent to discover the body and consume it. Kotoko then pieces together the rest of the story, explaining that the woman's boyfriend named Machi had died alongside another woman. Before his death, he had manipulated financial records and embezzled a large amount of money, leaving him with no way out. Years later, a man named Yoshihara, who had worked with the boyfriend, confessed that he was the one who killed him and stole the money. Yoshihara had also contacted the boyfriend's younger brother and asked to meet with him, but he was told to see the woman first. Not long afterward, the police concluded that the woman had killed Yoshihara. However, Kotoko reveals that this version of events is not actually true. According to her, the real killer was the boyfriend's younger brother, who became overwhelmed with anger after learning the truth about his brother's death and decided to take revenge by killing Yoshihara himself. Kotoko further explains that the woman later tried to remove every trace that could lead back to the real culprit from inside her house. However, she could not get rid of the evidence connected to the body once it was outside, so she dumped Yoshihara's corpse into the serpent's swamp. Believing the serpent would consume the body, she hoped the remaining evidence would disappear as well. Shortly after, Kuro suddenly arrives at the scene, causing the serpent to become visibly frightened because he considers Kotoko's companion far more terrifying than himself. Kuru immediately tells Kotoko to stop introducing him as her boyfriend since that is not true, but Kotoko brushes the matter aside and insists that they can settle that issue later. For now, she says their priority is helping the serpent by answering the questions that still remain about the case. After that, the serpent again asks them the real reason behind the suspect throwing the body in the swamp. Kotoko says that it was so Tanya could have the police find something that she was looking for, as she had previously tossed something here, and after murdering Yoshihara, she figured that she should retrieve it. Kotoko further explains that if Tanya had told them that she had dumped the murder weapon here, there's a good chance the police would have searched the swamp. The serpent then tells her that if Tanya straight away said that the murder weapon was here, she didn't have to go through all this trouble. Kotoko says that to carry out her plan, Tanya needed the police to find out about the incident, believe that she was the culprit and arrest her, and hear her confess that she threw the murder weapon into the swamp. Furthermore, Kotoko says that the fact that she threw the weapon into the swamp would mean she was trying to conceal the crime, and since many hikers come through here, the body would have been discovered quickly. Kotoko then reveals that it was a baby that she had with her boyfriend. Shortly after her boyfriend and moving back home, Tanya realized that she was pregnant with this child, and she saw it as the child of the man who betrayed her. Soon, her child passed away, and the corpse of the fetus ended up in her hands. Unable to tell anyone about it, she dealt with it all alone. Eventually, she threw her fetus in the river, and when she found out the truth about her boyfriend's death, she regretted her actions further. Tanya eventually regrets her actions and comes up with a plan to make sure the police search the swamp. On their way back, Kuru asks Kotoko whether her deduction is actually correct. Kotoko explains that while she cannot be completely certain about every detail, she does know that Tanya did not lie to the police. She further reveals that before meeting the guardian serpent, she had a ghost visit Tanya in her holding cell. During that visit, Tanya asked the ghost whether the serpent had failed to find the body. Kotoko then reminds Kuro that the guardian had stated that if Tanya truly wanted the corpse to be eaten, she could have simply asked. Hearing this explanation, Kuro says that he finally understands how Kotoko's abilities work, but he also warns her to be more careful because she constantly puts herself in dangerous situations. 2 years later, a man is driving through heavy rain while not paying attention to the road ahead. Suddenly, a girl appears in front of his car and is later revealed to be a yokai, causing him to lose control and crash off the road. Meanwhile, Saki has become a police officer and is assigned to investigate the strange accident. Saki tells the other officer that the college student who was driving the car said that a girl wielding a steel beam about 2 meters long, who was wearing a flashy red and black dress with no face, appeared in front of his car, so he panicked and swerved off the road. Earlier, another police officer asks Saki whether she is investigating the case of Steel Lady Nanase, a former idol who died at the beginning of the year. The officer explains that many rumors had surrounded Nanase during her career, and in an attempt to escape the media attention, she stayed at a hotel. However, tragedy struck when a steel beam from a nearby construction site fell and killed her. Since then, stories have spread throughout Makurazaka City claiming that Nanase appears every night as a ghostly figure. According to the rumors, she still wears the same outfit from her idol days and carries the steel beam that caused her death. Back in the present, Saki tells her partner that Steel Lady Nanis might be the same girl who appeared in front of the car on the night of the accident. However, the officer finds the idea difficult to believe and dismisses it. Before he leaves, Saki shares another thought, suggesting that there is a possibility that yokai and ghosts may actually exist in the world. As soon as she says it, she begins thinking about her ex-boyfriend Kuru and wonders whether he might have been some kind of yokai or supernatural being all along. Later that night, Saki runs into Kotoko on her way back home, and before leaving, Kotoko tells her to take her advice and run away. At that moment, the ghost of Nanase suddenly appears in front of Saki. Seeing the danger, Kotoko immediately tells her to run because Nanase has become a vengeful spirit that intends to kill her. However, instead of fleeing, Saki charges straight toward Nanase. She believes that the fear and depression she has been dealing with are connected to this ghost, and she refuses to keep running away from it any longer. When Nanase attacks, Saki manages to dodge the strike and attempts to fight back, but her punch passes right through the ghost's body. Kotoko then jumps into the battle and launches a fierce attack against Nanase. After taking several hits, the spirit suddenly vanishes into thin air. Once the danger has passed, Saki helps Kotoko reattach the prosthetic leg that had come off during the fight. Kotoko then assures her that she will handle the Steel Lady Nanase case from now on, so there is no need for Saki to worry about it anymore. Despite this, Saki insists on taking Kotoko to the police station so they can gather evidence regarding Nanase's attacks. During their conversation, Kotoko realizes that Saki is Kuro's former girlfriend and quickly informs her that she is now Kuro's current girlfriend. Saki takes Kotoko home and carefully puts bandages on her while asking about her background. Kotoko answers that she currently studies at the same university Saki and Kuru once attended, and that she also met Saki at the hospital before. Since Saki does not remember clearly, Kotoko explains it was over 4 years ago. Saki then asks if it is really true that Kotoko is Kuru's girlfriend, adding that Kotoko does not seem like his type. Kotoko replies that it is still possible he chose someone very different from his usual type because he was once dumped by someone who matched it more closely. Saki then assumes Kuro might have talked to Kotoko at the hospital after his cousin died during a moment of grief, and then somehow got stuck with her afterward. Kotoko responds by proudly showing photos of herself with Kuro, saying they look like a happy couple, even though Kuro appears mostly uninterested in them. She then adds that Kuro may look fully human, but in reality he might not fully fit that category at all. She adds that she is in a similar situation herself, which is why she believes they are the perfect match. Kotoko then formally introduces herself as the goddess of wisdom who serves ghosts, yokai, and other supernatural beings. Following that, Saki explains that one of the detectives in her department has noticed several unusual incidents occurring throughout the city and has been investigating them. She also admits that Steel Lady Nanis is far more dangerous and violent than she originally thought, and if nobody stops her, she may eventually kill someone. Kotoko then reveals that Kuro has been missing for an entire week, which quickly shifts the conversation into a petty argument as both girls start acting jealous and debating which of them would make the better girlfriend for Kuro. Kotoko mentions that Kuro has a condition in which he can't die, and even if someone tries to kill him, he will come back to life. Saki is surprised that she knows about his unique condition, and despite knowing that fact, she's doing what she couldn't do. Before leaving, Kotoko tells Saki that she will gladly send her a wedding invitation whenever she and Kuro get married. Later, Saki does some research about Nanase, who was an idol that wasn't particularly famous, but grew a bit more famous because of how she died. Nanis was personally scouted by the president of a talent agency who wasn't popular at first, but gained her popularity at a rapid speed within 1 year. Since her life was full of success, Saki wonders what is the thing that led her to die like that. She then happens to find information about her father's death, which was so unfortunate that he fell down the steps of his apartment and died. There were rumors that Nanis resented her father because he quit work when she got famous, and that she killed him and made it look like an accident. Trying to escape media attention, Nanis stops working as an idol and begins staying in different hotels, unaware that she is soon going to die in one of them. The next day, Saki meets her coworker and asks whether he would believe that Steel Lady Nanis is actually a ghost. The officer replies that there is clearly something abnormal about Nanase, and if she really returned as a vengeful spirit to take revenge on society, then there must be some deeper truth behind her existence. Meanwhile, Kotoko is also investigating Nanase and concludes that she is driven by strong resentment and lingering grudges, which currently act as the source of her power. Nanis's mere presence is so frightening that even monsters in Makurazaka City avoid going anywhere near her. As Kotoko continues her research, she eventually discovers an illustration of Steel Lady Nanis that looks identical to her real appearance. She immediately suspects that the drawing must have been made by someone who personally witnessed Nanis before her death. In order to defeat Nanis, Kotoko needs more information from accurate references regarding Nanis's death from a reliable source, which means she has to ask Saki for a favor. In the meantime, Saki is also doing research on Nanis's death, realizing that her body was found on Saturday and the location was a future condominium construction site that was near her hotel. The first person to discover Nanis's body is an elderly man who lives between the hotel area and the construction site. He later tells the police that the night before Nanas's death, he heard the sound of a steel beam falling, so he went to investigate the next morning. Nanis's body is completely crushed under a steel beam that is about 3 to 5 meters long. Her death is so violent that her face is unrecognizable and even her teeth are destroyed. However, investigators are still able to identify her as Nanis Karin through her bag and ID card. Saki becomes more uneasy after hearing a statement from Nanis's older sister, which raises even more questions in her mind. Suddenly, she hears a strange noise coming from her window that frightens her badly. When she goes to check, she finds a yokai standing there who calmly says he has been sent by Kotoko. He explains that Kotoko is requesting Saki's assistance and warns that if she refuses, more yokai will continue to come to her every night asking for help. The yokai then adds that Kotoko wants to learn more about Nanase's death so she can figure out how to defeat her. Later, Kotoko waits for Saki at a restaurant while enjoying her noodles. Instead of Saki appearing, a yokai informs her that Steel Lady Nanase has shown up and Kotoko decides to leave, telling the ghost to inform Saki about everything. When Kotoko arrives, she gets surprised to see Nanase attacking someone. To her surprise, the person is none other than Kuru himself. Kotoko decides to observe from a distance and notices that Kurao moves clumsily, clearly showing no training in sports or martial arts, yet he still faces the monster without fear. At that moment, Saki arrives and gets angry at Kotoko for sending a yokai to her earlier, then storms off from their meeting place. When Saki sees Kuru fighting Nanase alone, she urgently asks Kotoko to help him. However, Kotoko refuses and says they can leave him alone because he must already be prepared to have his head smashed at least once. Saki feels guilty for Kuru and tries to step forward, but Kotoko stops her, warning that she could get caught in the middle of the fight. Kotoko explains that Kurao keeps tripping over his own feet, and since he is confident enough to take a steel beam to the face, he will likely get back up, even if he dies. In the middle of the fight, Kuru suddenly trips over a soda can and falls, and Nanase immediately crushes his head in a single blow. Seeing that, Saki freaks out and Kotoko figures out that this is the first time she is seeing him die. She also asks why she broke up with him, and Saki explains that she saw a cut on his hand disappear immediately, and yet he acted like nothing even happened. Kotoko explains that Kuro is immortal, so Saki should have already expected something like that. In response, Saki says that many of Kuro's relatives and extended family members have died from illnesses or strange causes, and only Kuru has managed to live a relatively normal life. Suddenly, Kuru's head regenerates, and he comes back to life as if nothing happened. After that, he calmly walks toward Nanase and easily grabs her by the neck, surprising Saki with his strength. Kotoko then explains that everything traces back more than 10 generations to the head of the Sakuragawa family at that time. She also reveals that the second yokai Kurao consumed was a Kudan, a creature that grants the ability to predict the future. Back then, the family had forced his relatives to eat Kudan flesh along with mermaid meat in an attempt to gain prophetic abilities while also preventing death after seeing the future. However, many people died during the experiments, and the project was eventually abandoned. Over time, Kuru's grandmother revived the experiment on him and succeeded, but as a result, Kuro became something no longer fully human. To see if Kuro was immortal, and if he could predict the future, she cut up his body and made him suffer mortal wounds repeatedly until he stopped feeling pain almost altogether. Back in the present, Kuru manages to break Nanase's neck, and they wonder if this will be her true end. To their surprise, Nanase once again stands up and Kotoko tells him that they will need a different strategy to defeat Nanase now. Before they could do anything, Nanase disappeared into thin air. Kuro then walks towards the girls and asks Saki what she is doing here. Saki tells him that she works as a police officer, and seeing them talk like that makes Kotoko jealous. Kuru firmly tells Saki that Kotoko is his girlfriend right now, but Kotoko feels unhappy because the way he says it makes it sound like it is something painful for him. After that, Kuro apologizes to Saki on Kotoko's behalf, saying that Kotoko might have caused her some trouble. Saki, however, stays calm, gives him a drink, and says it feels nice to see him again after such a long time. Kotoko then suddenly grabs Kuro's arm and pulls him away, saying they should leave so they do not keep talking in that kind of way anymore. Even so, the truth is that Kuro and Kotoko are at Saki's house because Saki was too scared to go back home by herself. While Saki is changing her clothes in another room, Kuru keeps staring in that direction, and this makes Kotoko feel even more jealous, so she scolds him for acting like that. After a while, Saki asks Kuro if he was fighting the Steel Lady Nanis, because Kotoko ordered him to do it, and Kuru has no choice but to agree. He then explains that when he reached the station, a goblin cat that had been attacked by the Steel Lady Nanase came to him asking for help. Kuru thinks that after he spent more time with Kotoko, these creatures began to trust him and see him as someone they can depend on. Since Kuru didn't have enough time to contact Kotoko, he decided to go there on his own, and that is when Nanase appeared. Kuru did not have enough time to contact Kotoko, so he went there on his own, and that is when Nanase appeared. What surprised him most was that the Steel Lady Nanase did not seem afraid of him when she first saw him. Kotoko then explains to Saki that most ghosts and monsters usually feel fear when they are around Kuru, but Nanase is different because she does not seem to be afraid of him at all. She further clarifies that Nanase was born from the thoughts, dreams, and emotions of modern humans, meaning she is essentially a monster created from human imagination itself. Saki questions Kotoko and asks if she truly expects anyone to believe something like that. But Kotoko calmly responds that monsters made from imagination are not actually that powerful and are usually not as dangerous as they sound. Kotoko also mentions that there is even a wiki page about Nanase, which includes her description and an image, and it matches exactly the same appearance as the one they encountered. Because of this, Kotoko believes that Nanase is being sustained by that wiki page itself, which gives her energy and allows her to continue existing as a strong spirit. Kotoko then picks up the laptop and states that they could consider this wiki as the true identity of the Steel Lady Nanis, treating it as the source of her existence. Furthermore, Kotoko explains that as long as people fantasize and desire their existence, Steel Lady Nanis will remain immortal. Even if they cut off her head, she is going to come back over and over again, because her life comes not from within her, but from the desires of others. Kotoko explains that Nanase doesn't have any emotions or programmed steps, but she's an automation that continues to move in the way people want her to. Kuru then asks Kotoko how they are even going to defeat her now, and when he saw the wiki he realized that people are just making her move violently. Kotoko replies that this is the reason why they are going to use the site to their advantage to defeat her. In order to do that, they are going to need Saki's abilities as a police officer, and Saki asks if she wants her to shut the wiki site down. Kotoko thinks that it's not a realistic thing to shut down a personal website without a valid reason. Kotoko now wants valid information on Nanase's death, and then they are going to create a story that surpasses the rumors of Steel Lady Nanase. According to Kotoko, their plan is to rewrite the story by proving that Nanase is not actually a ghost. If the people who currently believe in Nanase's existence begin to accept the new version of the story, then Nanis will lose the power that keeps her alive and eventually disappear. However, Saki points out that this sounds impossible because once a rumor spreads, it does not matter if someone provides a logical explanation, since not everyone will believe it. Kotoko responds by saying that she plans to fight fiction with even more fiction. She intends to post a story on the forums that is more convincing and interesting than the claim that the Steel Lady Nanase is a ghost. Her goal is to make people believe that the Steel Lady Nanase is nothing more than a fictional creation. Kotoko explains that while many people believe in ghosts, they also want to believe that such frightening things do not really exist. As Saki listens, she realizes that what Kotoko is trying to do is basically a form of fraud. Kotoko openly agrees with that opinion, but says they have no other choice because it is the only way to get rid of Nanase. To convince the people on the forums that Nanis is not a ghost, they first need to explain who is responsible for all the attacks happening around Makurazaka City. After that, they also need to explain the reason why those attacks are being carried out. Saki figures out that Kotoko wants her to leak information about Nanase to her, and since she is from a different division, it won't cause issues for her either. Kotoko then discovers the documents about Nanase hidden underneath Saki's pillow, leaving Saki with no choice but to reveal everything she knows. Saki explains that Nanase had been suspected of killing her father, and because the media constantly followed and pressured her, she eventually hid herself in Makurazaka City. Saki also reveals that one reason Nanase often went to that area was because she wanted to smoke, but since she was still underage, she could not do it openly in public. What Saki finds especially strange is the way Nanis died. She points out that if steel beam were falling towards someone, that person would normally try to protect themselves or move out of the way. However, there were no signs that Nanis had made any attempt to defend herself. Saki also explains that many of the suspicions surrounding the case involve Nanis' sister because if Nanis died, all of her property and inheritance would automatically pass on to her. After hearing this information, Kotoko and the others head to the scene of the accident. Once there, Kotoko summons the spirit of a construction worker who was connected to the site in order to learn the truth. The worker's spirit explains that the steel beam fell purely by accident and that Nanase made no effort to save herself when it happened. From this, they conclude that Nanase no longer wanted to live and willingly accepted her death. Meanwhile, Saki is so terrified by the sight of an actual ghost that she drops to the ground and starts shivering in fear. The ghost then begins to cry, showing his deep regret over not being able to save Nanase before the accident happened. After listening to him, Kotoko realizes that the ghost is telling the truth and declares that their investigation has finally come to an end. However, Saki questions whether they can really be certain about that conclusion because there was no deduction or complicated theory involved in reaching it. Kotoko replies that they already have a witness who saw what happened, and more importantly, there is nothing else they can do to investigate the matter further. Saki then points out that even if Kotoko writes a well-crafted explanation and posts it online, whether people choose to believe it or not will ultimately come down to luck. Because of this, Kotoko decides to make use of Kuru's ability to see possible futures in order to find the best story to present. However, doing so requires Kuru to die and come back to life once again. Kotoko recalls what Kuru explained in the past about the powers of a Kudan. According to him, Kudans do not actually predict the future. Instead, they choose one future from countless possible outcomes and make that future become reality. Because of that, Kuru must allow Nanase to kill him again. While he is dead, he needs to search through the endless possibilities and select the future in which they finally find a way to defeat Nanase. On the other hand, another police officer who is Saki's friend as well confronts Nanase, believing she is a clown who dressed like that at this hour. Deep down, the officer knows that this is the same woman without a face, wearing a red dress and carrying a steel beam. In an instant, Nanase kills him using her steel beam. The next day, the police begin an investigation into the officer's death, and one of the officers questions Saki about where she was at the time of the incident. Another officer suggests that Terada may have been murdered because of a grudge he picked up while working on the job, and as a result, members of the Makurazaka Police Department are brought in for questioning. The person leading the investigation then asks Saki if it is true that Terada had been investigating Steel Lady Nanase, and mentions that many people are already connecting his death to the urban legend. As Saki listens, she regrets not warning Terada sooner and begins blaming herself for what happened. Soon after the incident, the internet explodes with rumors that Steel Lady Nanase has finally committed a murder. The story spreads quickly, and more people begin believing that she is real. Meanwhile, Kotoko continues researching the case from her hotel room. After spending a long time looking through information, she starts feeling tired and absent-mindedly wonders when it last rained. At that moment, Kuru arrives with some chocolates for her, hoping they will help improve her mood. Elsewhere, Saki feels guilty that Kuru is staying in the same hotel as her while having to use a separate room. She then updates him on the situation, explaining that things have changed greatly since the last incident. According to her, most of the comments and discussions online now strongly believe that Detective Terada's death was the work of Steel Lady Nanase. Kotoko further tells him that Terada was even an Olympic candidate in judo, so if someone like him got beaten to death, then it sounds so unnatural that it's easy to think it's the work of Steel Lady Nanase. Kotoko further explains that there are many guesses, rumors, and discussions surrounding Detective Terada's death, while other people continue talking about Nanase and her famous steel weapon. She points out that Saki has now become deeply involved in the case, and Kuru feels uneasy because he knows someone has already died and he cannot simply protect her from everything that may happen. Later, Saki arrives, and Kotoko informs her that it is true that Nanase was responsible for Detective Terada's death. According to Kotoko, an Ayakashi that witnessed the incident reported the details directly to her. Kotoko also believes that if the police continue investigating the murder, they will need more reliable and consistent information, which will make the situation much harder to deal with. However, she says that an even bigger problem has appeared. Steel Lady Nanase has suddenly become far more violent than before. Since Nanase has now been linked to a murder, the rumors about her are beginning to change. Instead of being seen as just a mysterious ghost, people are now imagining her as a terrifying being that relentlessly hunts down its victims until they are dead. Because of this, Kotoko fears that another person could become a victim that very night. What worries her even more is the possibility that there may be several victims instead of just one. Kotoko also believes that as more stories, rumors, and fantasies about Nanase continue to spread, they are making her existence even stranger and more powerful than before. Furthermore, Kotoko says that they have to defeat the Steel Lady Nanase tonight anyhow. She then tells Saki that in order to fabricate logical fiction to take Steel Lady Nanase down, she will need the truth at all times. Since there were no substances found from Terada's death, it sounds more and more like Nanase's death. Kotoko explains that most people on the internet believe a ghost is responsible because it seems strange that Detective Terada could have been beaten to death without putting up any kind of struggle. According to her, they need to create a fictional culprit who could be more than one person, and that person does not even need to be responsible for every crime in the same way. Kuru suggests that they should focus on explaining the motive behind Terada's death. He believes that once they establish a believable motive, they can then come up with other explanations for the rest of the incidents. However, Kotoko thinks it is impossible to completely get rid of the Nanase story because people enjoy stories that give them dreams and excitement, and many hope that reality is similar to the tales they hear. Saki points out that until recently, people were trying to figure out who was behind the random attacks happening around the city. She believes that if they create convincing alternative versions of the story and those explanations become popular enough, they may be able to make Steel Lady Nanase disappear. Even so, before they can do that, they first need several important details to make sense. They need to explain why all of these attempted attacks supposedly carried out by Steel Lady Nanase happened in the first place, and they also need to identify who was actually responsible for committing those incidents. They struggle to come up with a fake culprit for Nanase's attacks and Terada's murder that are believable enough, until Kuru suggests spreading multiple rumors online and allowing internet users to create the fake culprit for them. At the same time, he can keep Nanase busy by letting her keep killing him and choosing new futures. Later, Kuru and Saki wait for Nanase to appear in the city while Kotoko just sleeps since she hasn't had a proper sleep in a while. On their way, Saki asks him about Kotoko and their relationship together, and Kuro says that it's been around 2.5 years since they met. Saki mentions that Kotoko is the exact opposite of his type, and yet they seem fine. While talking, Saki mentions his cousin Rika and says that she is 100% his type. In a flashback, Kuru and Saki visit Rika at the hospital for the first time. As soon as Saki meets her, she immediately feels uncomfortable around her and quickly excuses herself from the room. Saki gets the feeling that Rika has a strange influence on the people around her, almost as if she is quietly affecting them without saying anything. While at the hospital, Saki also overhears several people talking about Rika. From their conversation, she learns that Rika had once again tried to take her own life, and that she seemed to have completely lost the will to keep living. Back in the present, Saki tells Kuru that she believes Rika had been holding him back for a long time. She adds that if being in a relationship with Kotoko helps him move on and free himself from that situation, then she thinks it is a good thing. In response, Kuro admits that he truly does love Rika. He acknowledges that he may still be tied down by those feelings, but he also confesses that there were times when he wished she was not around. Hearing this surprises Saki because she has always believed that Rika was already dead. Confused by what he said, she asks him to explain. Kuru then reveals a shocking truth that Rika is not dead at all. In fact, according to him, her death is something that simply cannot happen. Not long afterward, Kotoko wakes up from her nap and immediately panics when she realizes she left Kuru and Saki alone together. She starts wondering why she ever allowed the two of them to spend time by themselves in the first place. Before leaving, Kuru explains that the Ayakashi who bring information about Steel Lady Nanase may become frightened if they see him nearby. Because of that, he decides to wait by the exit while they come to speak with Kotoko. While waiting, Saki asks Kotoko if she has ever met Rika, and Kotoko replies that she has because the hospital where Rika was admitted was also where she was staying. Saki also mentions that Rika also ate the flesh of a kudan and a mermaid, but Kotoko wonders if Saki is just trying to get more information out of her. Kotoko says that she knew about that, because Rika was also feared by the monsters, even though she and Kuru haven't told her the details. Kotoko then explains that she had been living in her family's mansion until about a month ago. This surprises Saki, who wonders why Rika would choose to go to Kotoko's house. Kotoko explains that she could not allow Kuro and Rika to live together, so she had to step in and make other arrangements. She further explains that Rika was discharged from the hospital after a new hospital director was appointed, which led to changes in the hospital's policies and overall atmosphere. The hospital staff never really knew what to do with Rika, and many of them were actually glad to see her leave when she was finally discharged. After leaving the hospital, Rika asked Kuru whether she could stay with him because she did not have anywhere else to go. Kuru asked if she had a place to stay, and when she admitted that she did not, she requested to stay at his apartment for a while. However, Kuru refused, explaining that his apartment was very small and would not be suitable for another person. Rika continued to press the matter and offered to take care of the housework if he let her stay there. Hearing that, Kuru began having some awkward thoughts about the situation. He then came up with another idea and decided that he should talk to Kotoko about it, since her parents knew many people and might be able to help find a better place for Rika to stay. After that, Kotoko arrives to pick them up and Rika leaves the hospital behind, and the reason behind Kotoko inviting her over to her place is because they had plenty of vacant rooms at her house. Back in the present, Kotoko tells Saki that Rika is very beautiful and also very polite, which is why Kotoko's aunt welcomed her warmly without hesitation. Kotoko explains that at first she really disliked Rika, but over time they sometimes held small parties together and even went out without Kuru joining them. However, after Rika left, they completely lost track of her. They have no idea where she went or where she is now, because all the contact details and addresses she gave them turned out to be fake. Saki then asks what Kuro went through after Rika suddenly disappeared. Kotoko explains that Kuro became very frustrated and started constantly trying to contact her again and again. She also says that Rika often spent time on the computer, and at that time they did not realize she was actually creating a wiki page and slowly building up the idea of Steel Lady Nanase. Kotoko admits that she never expected Rika to do something like that. But later, when she saw the painting of Nanase on the wiki page, she realized it had been drawn very carefully and exactly. She believes that Rika herself must have created that image because she had suddenly become very serious about painting. Kotoko then assumes that Rika may have repeatedly died and returned, each time trying to reach a future where people on the internet would never stop talking about Steel Lady Nanase and Potmiananin, effectively bringing the legend to life and then coming back again and again to continue shaping it. Kotoko suspects that Rika has been experimenting to see how powerful her ability to choose futures can be. Nanase appears in the city, while elsewhere, Rika kills herself to choose another future. Kuru then begins his fight with Nanase while Kotoko begins spreading rumors online, hoping to cause enough doubt in the online area that Nanase will be rendered powerless. After that, Kotoko decides to create a completely new story, claiming that Nanase was nothing more than an urban legend invented by someone. As she writes, she asks Saki to tell her everything she saw during Kurau's fight, where he is currently managing to defend himself against Steel Lady Nanase. Using that information, Kotoko begins building a fictional explanation. In her story, Detective Terada's death caused people to believe that Nanase was the murderer, even though that was not actually true. Kotoko writes that making people believe Nanase was responsible was exactly what the real killer wanted. According to the story she creates, the killer invented the urban legend of Steel Lady Nanase as part of a carefully planned scheme. Kotoko explains that Detective Terada was an outstanding detective, and the killer took advantage of that fact. She claims that there was already a small online community discussing the Nanase legend, and the killer used that monster story as cover to carry out real crimes and attempted attacks one after another without attracting suspicion. Kotoko continues expanding her theory by explaining that before Terada's murder, the killer deliberately made the Steel Lady Nanase legend more popular. The purpose was to confuse both the public and the police. According to her fictional story, the killer even dressed up as Nanase and attacked people in order to make the urban legend seem real and believable. By spreading fear and strengthening the rumors, the killer ensured that when Detective Terada eventually died, everyone would immediately blame Steel Lady Nanase instead of looking for a real culprit. After murdering Terada, the killer puts the setup away and removes any trace of them ever being there and then flees the scene. All that's left after that is to burn the costume they used as Steel Lady Nanase, along with the ring. Soon, many online users started asking Kotoko various questions regarding the fake story, and she managed to answer all of them. Kotoko tells them that the killer's pendulum setup was originally rigged so that the weight would strike the detective from behind so he wouldn't see it. However, Kotoko explains that Detective Terada seemed to notice that something was coming toward him just before he died. Even though he was not carrying a weapon, he was an excellent detective, so she believes he may have sensed that someone was trying to kill him. Since the heavy object was moving at a very high speed, it was already too late for him to dodge out of the way or protect his face from the impact. As Kotoko continues explaining her theory, Saki is surprised by how quickly she is able to come up with these details. One anonymous user then asks why the killer would specifically target Terada's face. Kotoko replies that if the killer intentionally wanted the heavy object to strike Terada in the face, they could have distracted him by drawing his attention towards something else at the last moment, causing the object to hit his head directly. After that, another user questions why the killer would go through such a complicated plan just to murder one detective. When Kotoko sees that question, she realizes that her current explanation is not very convincing. She then responds that the killer went to such great lengths because they wanted to distance themselves from the investigation as much as possible after Detective Terada was dead. By making the death appear unusual and difficult to understand, the killer could avoid drawing suspicion toward themselves and stay far away from the case. Kotoko continues to explain the details about the killers and says that the killer is not a man but actually a woman. Furthermore, Kotoko explains that Detective Terada was a judo athlete, so there is no way he would be easily killed by a woman, and that is the reason why they created a ghost like Steel Lady Nanase. Saki realizes that this would explain why the killer needed Steel Lady Nanase and why they used such a specific way of killing him. Kotoko then continues her made-up story by claiming that the killer is actually a female police officer working in the same department as Detective Terada. According to her theory, it would have been much easier for the killer to learn about Terada's habits, schedule, and investigations if they worked closely with him on a daily basis. At the same time, Kurau is locked in a brutal battle against Steel Lady Nanase. He continues getting seriously injured as he desperately searches for the perfect future in which they can finally defeat her. As Saki reads Kotoko's story, she becomes angry because she realizes that the female officer being described could easily be mistaken for her. Kotoko quickly tells her to calm down, explaining that she is not trying to frame her specifically. She says that she cannot simply choose a random female officer without thinking carefully about how believable the story will sound. Meanwhile, Saki starts thinking about Rika and realizes that she possesses a similar ability to influence the future she desires. Elsewhere, Rika once again takes her own life, only to alter the future afterward and have her body regenerate as if nothing happened. Back at the battle, Kuru is forced to fight Nanase throughout the entire night. Kotoko hates the idea of watching her boyfriend get killed again and again while trying to reach the future they need. During their discussion, Saki reveals that the person managing the website is actually Rika. Because of that, Rika could have censored or deleted any posts she wanted. However, Kotoko points out that doing so would have been a mistake. She explains that if Rika started deleting or censoring posts that questioned the existence of ghosts, people would immediately suspect that the site administrator had a problem with those opinions. If that happened, it would actually hurt the efforts of someone who wants Steel Lady Nanase to continue existing. For that reason, Rika had no choice but to leave those posts alone and allow the discussions to continue freely. When Kotoko spreads the news that Nanase actually is a ghost, that surprises Saki, and she asks her why she is doing that when her whole deal was that Nanase was not a ghost. Kotoko replies that they are going to use that as their way in and establish reason from within, and if they can convince them of a reason for a ghost to appear, they will inevitably find the way to make that ghost disappear. Kotoko then interacts with the audience on the wiki, saying the detective who was investigating Steel Lady Nanase on his own had the misfortune of meeting the real one and was bludgeoned to death with a steel beam. Since the detective didn't believe in ghosts, when he encountered a real one, he was shocked, and that's when he was smacked. Kotoko then reveals that Nanase ended her life, and that night, Nanase was so overwhelmed with despair that she accepted the fact that she was about to have her face crushed by a falling steel beam. So Kotoko wonders why she returned as a ghost and why she is using a steel beam as a weapon. Kotoko further says that if she became a ghost to get back at the society that drove her to death, she must have gotten her revenge. Kotoko then continues her story by saying that the reason Nanase was forced out of the spotlight as an idol was because she became suspected of murdering her own father. Because of that, Kotoko argues that Nanase did not become a ghost out of hatred for society. Instead, she appeared because she wanted to reveal a different truth and expose a different problem that the world had overlooked. Kotoko's fictional explanation claims that Nanase is filled with anger because she never killed her father in the first place. According to the story, she returned as a ghost because she wanted everyone to know the truth behind what really happened. Meanwhile, Kuru continues taking an enormous amount of damage while fighting Steel Lady Nanase. As the battle drags on, Saki asks Kotoko about the direction her story is taking. Kotoko explains that she is essentially acting as a fiction writer. Since the people reading the forum already support and believe in ghosts, she needs to give them a mystery that they can accept. Her goal is to solve that mystery within the story and, in doing so, symbolically make the ghost disappear from people's minds. Kotoko then introduces another major part of her theory. She claims that Nanase's father left behind a note saying that he suspected Nanase wanted to kill him. However, Kotoko suggests that the truth may have been completely different. In her version of events, Nanase's father had become jealous of his daughter's success and popularity. Because of that jealousy, he chose to end his own life in a way that would make it appear as though Nanase was responsible, ensuring that the blame would fall on her even after his death. However, Kotoko believes that Nanase did not even kill her father, and she doesn't even feel any malice towards him. Kotoko also claims that Nanase met her father in heaven and heard the truth from his own mouth. After finding out her own father maliciously tried to ruin her, she became filled with regret, and her soul could not fully move on. Kotoko also argues that if people begin to pity Nanase instead of fearing her, then Steel Lady Nanase will gradually disappear from their nights. As more people read the story, they slowly start feeling sympathy for Nanase, and this causes the ghost to become weaker. Taking advantage of that change, Kuru manages to gain the upper hand and deals heavy damage to Nanase during their battle. Kotoko then encourages everyone reading the forum to offer prayers for Nanase. As more people do so, Nanase grows even weaker. Little by little, Rika begins to regain control of the situation. Kotoko later explains to Saki that if Nanase's ghost had appeared more clearly and looked even more hateful and vengeful, they might have been able to solve everything using the second explanation alone. Kotoko also points out that the more people on the internet want to believe her version of events, the harder it becomes for Rika to ignore it. Since the story is persuasive and gaining support, Rika will eventually be forced to accept at least part of it as a possible reality. Meanwhile, Rika takes her own life for the third time in her attempt to reach a desired future. At the same time, Kotoko begins presenting a third version of the story. In this new explanation, she suggests that Nanase may not actually be dead at all. Kotoko points out that Nanase's sister always claimed Nanase was not the type of person who would willingly take her own life. Because of that, Kotoko raises another possibility. Nanase might have survived, and the body that was found could have belonged to someone else. She further explains that the victim's face may have been deliberately crushed in order to hide their real identity, making everyone believe the body was Nanase's. After this, Kotoko brings up Hatsumi, Nanase's sister. She explains that Hatsumi and Nanase were not on good terms, and because of that, Hatsumi had once spread rumors that Nanase killed their father. Kotoko then suggests that Hatsumi might have feared Nanase faking her own death as a form of revenge against her. She continues explaining how Nanase's sister's actions, the rumors, and the investigation all seem to be connected and revolve around the same small group of people, rather than a larger mystery. Out of nowhere, Rika states that pretending to create or reinforce the idea of Nanase's ghost would actually be something that frightens Hatsumi even more. After this moment, Kuru fails to find the future outcome he was trying to reach, as none of the possible paths he sees lead to a successful solution. Kotoko then tells Saki that Rika is extremely skilled at what she does. She explains that Rika can come up with an argument on her own, die to pursue the future she wants, and then return to life on her own to take back control of the situation. According to Kotoko, Rika is thinking in much the same way as Saki, and is selecting futures where the fewest people disagree with her conclusions. Kotoko believes that Rika has already figured out what she is trying to do. Rika understands that Kotoko is attempting to weaken her influence little by little rather than destroying it all at once. She points out that their third solution has already been rejected, along with the profile of the supposed killer that came with it. However, nobody has questioned the part of the story claiming that Nanase's sister was the one who handed their father's note over to the media. Even so, Kotoko says that Rika will be satisfied as long as a ghost called Steel Lady Nanase does not continue to exist. Hearing this, Saki becomes concerned and wonders if that means every future Rika has been choosing is actually part of a larger plan she has already prepared. Kotoko responds by saying that all of the necessary preparations have finally been completed. According to her, everything up to this point has been leading toward one final move, and now it is time to deliver the decisive blow. Meanwhile, the battle continues. Kuru once again throws himself against Steel Lady Nanase, continuing his desperate struggle despite all the punishment he has already endured. At the same time, Kotoko remains focused on the online discussions in the wiki page, preparing the final stage of her plan while Kuru keeps Nanase occupied on the battlefield. Kotoko tells everyone that the three solutions she has presented thus far were just the formation to get to the actual truth, and there is someone behind this who is the one who created a ghost named Steel Lady Nanase and killed the detective Terada. Kotoko says that the one behind all this is none other than Nanase herself, as she is not dead. She also says that the one who died in the construction site was someone else made to look like Nanase. Hearing that, all the people don't believe her story, at first thinking she is explaining a story of a random drama. Kotoko explains that Nanase found a girl who looked exactly like her and she was suffering from mental illnesses as well. Since then, Nanase has made her look exactly like how she looks, including dyeing her hair and sneaking her into Nanase's hotel. That night, they go to the construction site where the new girl's face gets crushed by the steel beams, and it would make it impossible to identify her that way. According to Kotoko's latest story, Nanase successfully falsified the scene of her death and then escaped. After that, she supposedly took on another girl's identity and began living a completely new life. As people read this explanation, many of them become confused and start asking an important question. If Nanase is actually alive, then who exactly is Steel Lady Nanase? As Saki reads the reactions, she realizes what is happening. The readers have taken the three different solutions Kotoko presented, mixed together parts of each story, changed certain details and characters, and kept the elements they found most believable. Now, the people on the site are using their own imagination to build a new conclusion that proves Steel Lady Nanase does not exist at all. Meanwhile, during the battle, Nanase begins struggling against Kuru. Watching this happen makes Saki think they have finally won. However, Kotoko quickly tells her that the fight is not over yet. She says she still has not delivered the final blow, and she has no intention of allowing Rika to reach the future she wants. Kotoko then introduces the final stage of her argument. She tells everyone that in order to make the world completely believe she was dead, Nanase herself created the legend of Steel Lady Nanase. According to this theory, she deliberately spread the ghost story so that whenever people heard her name, the image of the ghost would immediately come to mind. Kotoko goes even further by claiming that Nanase personally created the wiki page about Steel Lady Nanase. She argues that the website and its users then spread the rumors at an unbelievable speed, causing the legend to grow larger and larger until it took on a life of its own. Hearing this, many readers become confused and start wondering what Kotoko is actually trying to prove. In response, Kotoko explains that Nanase was supposedly in Makurazaka City the previous night to continue spreading rumors about Steel Lady Nanase. According to her story, Nanase was also planning to visit another location afterward, where she intended to create yet another incident that would strengthen the urban legend even further. At that moment, the detective was going in his car when he noticed her and she reminded him of Nanase, so he stopped her to interrogate. When the detective looked closely, he recognized her as Nanase, but she just grabbed a torchlight and hit his head. On the other hand, Kuro is once again heavily injured while fighting Steel Beam Nanase, but since Nanase is getting weaker, he manages to hit a heavy blow. Saki is surprised that Kotoko's trick is working, and how she used the first 3 solutions to feed them basic elements that would make them believe her ultimate solution. Kotoko then tells her that Rika won't be able to reach any options to change this future, and she won't be able to control Nanase with that sight anymore. After that, Kuro successfully manages to defeat and kill Nanase, and in the end, the majority of people conclude that Nanase's stories were nothing more than fiction, while Rika's schemes are ultimately rejected and dismissed. Rika later sends an email to Kotoko, congratulating her on the victory, but she also warns that she will return again in the future. Saki reflects that everything now makes sense, since the only person capable of interfering with Rika's ability to predict and determine the future is Kuro himself. Kotoko then steps out of the car and explains that human imagination contains endless potential, as it can create yokai, ghosts, and demons, and even give life to monsters without people realizing it. After that, Kotoko hands a banana to Kuro, joking that after dying and coming back to life so many times, he must have become exhausted and lacking energy. Suddenly, Kotoko once again grabs her head, and Kuro repeats that she is actually the one who needs rest and nourishment because she has created countless possibilities and future outcomes, while also guiding Kuro to understand and follow them. Following this, all of the yokai begin celebrating their hard-earned victory, and seeing everyone so joyful once again lifts Kuro's spirits as well. Because of that, he suggests that it is finally time for them to return home. While heading back, Kuro apologizes to Saki for not stopping Rika sooner, believing that they might have been able to resolve everything before Detective Terada lost his life. Saki responds that neither of them could have predicted that such a tragic situation would unfold in the first place. The following day, Rika removes the website, and the people who had witnessed the flood of posts from that day quickly move on and begin discussing a completely different urban legend instead. Later, Saki visits the detective's memorial site to pray for his soul and reflects on how they will likely never learn the truth about what happened to Nanase and her family. That night, Saki happens to meet Kuro again, and he takes her out for dinner because Kotoko is still asleep, exhausted from everything she had gone through. During their conversation, Saki asks what Rika's true goal is, but Kuro explains that he continues to age like any normal person and simply hopes that one day he can die of old age. He further explains that once he dies, he will lose the ability to determine the future, and since he is rarely placed in situations dangerous enough to actually kill him, that day has not yet come. However, this is not the case with Rika, who is trying to use her ability as much as she can to return to being a normal human being. Saki gets surprised to hear that, saying even if she used her ability to go through all the possibilities, but the future where she is human being is impossible. Saki then comes to the realization that the reason Rika had been staying at the hospital was because she had been searching for a medical cure, yet even there she could not find any possibility of becoming normal through logical or scientific methods. Because of this, Rika had been trying to create an imaginary monster that possessed the power to turn her back into an ordinary human being. Kuro explains that Rika desperately wants a normal life, yet she continues to do the most abnormal things imaginable. He adds that even before she consumed the flesh of the Kuden and the mermaid, he had always felt that she possessed the heart of a monster. Kuro then admits that he is also concerned about Kotoko, knowing that she will continue putting herself in dangerous situations, which was the main reason he wanted to face Nanase on his own. He believes that Rika will target Kotoko next, and Saki finally understands that this was why Kuro had been searching for Rika in secret without informing Kotoko. After they finish their meal, Saki rides home on the bicycle that Kotoko usually uses, quietly thinking to herself that the world is finally safe once again. The next day, Kotoko wakes up believing she had only slept for about 4 hours, but when she checks her phone, she is shocked to realize that she had actually been unconscious for a full 28 hours. While taking a shower, she starts thinking about how Kuro and Saki must have had a lot of time to spend together without her around. At the same time, Kuro arrives at her room and begins searching for her everywhere, and just as he assumes she is not there, he turns to leave. Suddenly, Kotoko jumps onto him and starts sniffing him, quickly figuring out that he had indeed met Saki. Kuro calmly explains that he only went to return the bicycle that Kotoko had promised to give her, and that he has had no contact with Saki since then. Later on, they check out of the hotel, and Kotoko tells him that the best thing they can do right now is to find Rika and speak to her directly in person. Kuro then tells her a story about the princess Iwanaga and says that he needs someone like her, which immediately makes Kotoko angry. In order to cheer her up, Kuru tells her that she is more beautiful than any flower and that he never meant to send her away or replace her. After that, the two of them continue walking forward while holding hands as they go to meet Kotoko's parents. While walking, Kotoko believes that there are monsters, yokai, and other creatures in this world, but still, there is no reason to be afraid of them. Kotoko also thinks that even if she has to create a rational fiction, she will defend this world from that gap between truth and fiction. How long do you think it will take for Kuro to finally find Rika and put an end to her schemes for good? Comment yokai if you'd like a part 2 of this series. Like and subscribe the channel for more anime recaps.